My name is Victoria. I'm 42, and the last time my family saw me, I was supposedly washing out of community college with a drug problem they invented to explain why I stopped coming home. The irony wasn't lost on me as I adjusted my bulletproof vest in the parking lot of the Riverside County Courthouse. 23 years of radio silence, and now here, I was about to walk into the biggest federal racketeering case in California history, one that would destroy everything my family had built on: lies, manipulation, and the systematic exploitation of immigrant workers through their legitimate construction empire. I'd been tracking the Moretti family business for 3 years, not because they were Moretts, that was just unfortunate genetics, but because they'd been laundering money for the Sinaloa cartel while using undocumented workers as expendable labor, threatening deportation when they demanded basic safety equipment or fair wages. 18 people had died in preventable accidents. 18 families destroyed so my Uncle Tony could buy another yacht. The sun was setting behind the courthouse as I reviewed the case files one final time. Tomorrow I would testify as the lead U.S. Marshal on Operation Bloodline, the 3-year undercover investigation that had finally brought down the Moretti construction syndicate. Tomorrow, my family would learn that the college dropout with drug problems had been living under deep cover identities for the better part of 2 decades, working cases from human trafficking to international terrorism. But tonight, I was just Vicky, the disappointment, the one who couldn't handle real responsibility. 23 years earlier, Victoria's just not cut out for this kind of work, Uncle Tony had said, his voice carrying across the kitchen to where I sat, hunched over my criminal justice textbooks. I was 19, working 2 jobs to pay for community college, sleeping 4 hours a night, and still pulling a 3.8 GPA. She's too soft, too emotional. Look at her, she can barely keep her eyes open. My mother nodded, sliding another check across the table to my cousin Marco, who just flunked out of his 2nd university, but was somehow still the family's golden boy. Marco has that natural leadership quality. That's what you need in law enforcement. I'd applied to every federal program I could find. FBI, U.S. Marshal Service. Each application was a secret I kept from family dinners where they debated whether I'd make it through another semester or if I should just find a nice boy and settle down. Marco leaned back in his chair, beer already in hand at 6 p.m. Besides, Vicky's got that whole bleeding heart thing going on, always crying about some sob story. You can't be effective if you're worried about hurting people's feelings. That's exactly right, Tony agreed. This family's got a reputation to maintain. We don't need, he gestured vaguely in my direction, we don't need weakness associated with our name. The weakness he was referring to was my habit of questioning why their construction sites had such high injury rates, why workers always seemed to disappear after accidents, why the books never quite balanced when I helped with basic accounting. During summer breaks, the weakness was caring that people were getting hurt. I'd stopped asking questions after Tony pulled me aside and explained very gently that my college tuition money could disappear just as easily as it had appeared. Family businesses require family loyalty. Victoria, you understand that, right? I understood perfectly. I also understood that every federal academy I'd applied to had waitlisted me pending character references. References I couldn't provide, without destroying my own investigation that had already begun in those accounting ledgers. So I disappeared instead. 2 years later, the U.S. Marshals Training Academy in Gleno, Georgia, was everything my family thought I was too weak to handle. 6 months of tactical training, firearms proficiency, legal procedure, and psychological evaluation. I graduated 2nd. In my class, my family thought I was in rehab. I'd let them believe it. Let them spread stories about my drug problem and mental breakdown. Let them shake their heads sadly when people asked about Tony Moret's niece who couldn't get her life together. It was easier than explaining why I couldn't contact them, why I'd needed to completely disappear from their world to do what needed to be done. The truth was, I'd been recruited specifically because of my family connections, not despite them, because of them. The Marshal Service had been tracking Moretti construction for years, watching the pattern of workplace deaths, the suspicious financial transfers, the way workers vanished after filing injury claims. They needed someone on the inside, someone with natural access, someone the family trusted, someone they thought was too weak to be a threat. Present-day courthouse steps. The courthouse buzzed with reporters and federal agents as I made my final preparations. In a few hours, the biggest RICO case in the district's history would begin. and I would take the stand as the primary witness against my own family. Special Agent Martinez, my FBI liaison, approached with a tablet showing news coverage. Marshall Moretti, the family's legal team, is already spinning this as prosecutorial overreach. They're claiming they had no idea about any criminal activity. I wasn't surprised. The Moretti family had built their reputation on plausible deniability and selective ignorance. What about the workers we relocated? Safe. All 18 families have been moved to protective housing with legal status processing. The children are enrolled in school. They're going to be okay. That was what mattered. 18 families, some who'd been afraid to speak for years, finally had protection and a chance at legal status. Their testimony would corroborate the financial evidence I'd gathered during 3 years of attending family dinners, holiday parties, and business meetings while wearing a wire. Marshall Martinez looked concerned. Are you ready for this? I know testifying against family is they stopped being my family the moment I learned they were betting pool on which worker would die next. It was true. I'd found the betting slips in Tony's office safe. Actual wages and workplace fatalities, treated like a macabre office lottery. The memory still made my hands shake with rage. The next morning, courtroom, the federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was packed. Media, federal agents, defense attorneys, and in the back rows, my family, all of them. I hadn't seen them in 23 years. Uncle Tony had aged badly. Too much rich food and stress, probably from running a criminal empire. Marco looked exactly the same, which somehow made it worse. My mother sat between them, wearing the same expression of disapproving concern she'd perfected during my teenage years. They didn't recognize me. 2 decades of tactical training had changed more than just my posture. I was 42 years old, wearing a perfectly tailored federal uniform with insignia they couldn't read from the back of the courtroom. My hair was shorter, professional, my shoulders broader from years of physical training, my face harder from seeing things they couldn't imagine. But mostly I was invisible to them because they'd never really seen me in the first place. The prosecution calls Deputy U.S. Marshal Victoria Elena Moretti to the stand. The silence was immediate and absolute. I stood, my marshal's badge visible, on my belt, my service weapon properly holstered, my 23 years of federal service evident in every detail of my bearing. The bailiff swore me in while my family stared in shocked silence. Marshal Moretti, the prosecutor, began, "Please state your current position and length of service." I am a Deputy U.S. Marshal with the Los Angeles District, currently assigned to the Fugitive Task Force. I have served with the U.S. Marshal Service for 21 years. Prior to that, I completed 2 years with the DEA's Undercover Operations Division. Behind me, someone gasped. Probably my mother. And what is your relationship to the defendants? Anthony Moretti is my uncle. Marco Moretti is my cousin. The Moretti Construction Company is my family's business, or was until this investigation began. Marshal Moretti, please explain to the court how this investigation began. I turned slightly, just enough to see my family's faces in my peripheral vision. Uncle Tony had gone pale. Marco was frantically whispering to their attorney. My mother looked like she was about to faint. 3 years ago, I was approached by a joint federal task force investigating workplace deaths and human trafficking in the construction industry. They needed an agent with natural access to Moretti Construction's internal operations, someone the family would trust, someone they would never suspect. And why would they never suspect you? Because they thought I was a drug addict who dropped out of community college 23 years ago. The courtroom stirred. In the back, I heard my mother make a choking sound. Marshal Moretti, during those 23 years, what was your actual career progression? I recited my service record like a military citation, which in many ways it was. 2 years, D undercover, 21 years U.S. Marshal Service, specialized training in human trafficking, financial crimes, and organized crime, commendations for operations in 3 states. Current assignment as lead deputy on the West Coast Fugitive Task Force. And during this time, did you maintain contact with your family? No contacts. My assignment required complete separation to maintain operational security. What did your family believe happened to you? They were told I'd had a mental breakdown related to drug abuse and was in long-term rehabilitation. They were encouraged not to contact me. It was brutal testimony, laying out 23 years of lies and investigation. But it was also necessary. Every detail of their financial crimes, every recorded conversation, every witness account of worker intimidation and safety violations, all of it flowing through my testimony like water through a broken dam. The defense attorney was a shark in an expensive suit, but he had nothing to work with. How do you cross-examine someone who spent 3 years documenting crimes with federal surveillance equipment? Marshal Moretti, he tried. Isn't it true that you've harbored resentment against your family for years? That this investigation is really about personal revenge? I looked at him steadily. Sir, I've spent 23 years of my life protecting people, like the workers your clients killed. Revenge would have been much simpler and much less paperwork. The courtroom laughed despite itself. No further questions. After testimony, courthouse hallway. They were waiting for me outside the courtroom. All of them. My mother reached me first, her face streaming with tears. Victoria, Vicky, I don't understand. You told everyone I was a drug addict, I said quietly. For 23 years, you let them think I was weak, worthless, a disappointment to the family name. We thought, we were told. She was stammering, reaching for me like I was still 19 and might need comfort. I stepped back, not harshly, but definitively. Uncle Tony pushed forward, his face red with rage. You destroyed us, your own family. We raised you. You killed 18 people, I said. You threatened families with deportation so they wouldn't report safety violations. You ran betting pools on which worker would die next. He went silent. Marco was next, still trying to find an angle. Vicky, come on. Family is family. We can work this out. Deputy U.S. Marshal Moretti, I corrected. And no, we can't work this out. You're under federal indictment for racketeering, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. But you're our family. No, I said, and my voice carried the authority of 2 decades of federal service. I'm a law enforcement officer. You're criminals. The family relationship ended the moment you chose to profit from people's deaths. My mother was still crying, still reaching for some version of the broken girl they'd invented to explain my absence. But we love you. We've always loved you. You loved the idea of me as a failure. I said it made you feel better about your choices. The real me, the one who spent 23 years protecting people you were killing, you never wanted to know her. I turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, you were right about one thing. I was too soft for your kind of work. I could never have lived with 18 people's blood on my hands. 6 months later, the sentences were everything the families deserved. Tony got 25 to life. Marco got 15 years. The construction company was liquidated, with proceeds going to victim compensation. The 18 families I'd helped relocate sent me a card. On the anniversary of the arrests, their children were thriving in school. The adults had found legitimate work with companies that valued their lives and safety. I never saw my biological family again. They wrote letters from prison. Tony's full of rage, Marco's full of self-pity, my mother's full of guilt and regret. I didn't answer them. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, not because of what was done, but because of what it reveals about who people really are when they think no one is watching. I'd spent 23 years watching. The real victory wasn't the convictions or the sentences. It wasn't even the justice for the families who'd lost everything to my family's greed. The real victory was walking out of that courthouse as exactly who I'd always been. Someone who protected people instead of exploiting them. Someone who chose the harder path because it was the right path. Someone who'd rather be underestimated and effective than respected and complicit. My family had spent 23 years telling everyone I wasn't strong enough for their world. They were absolutely right. I was strong enough for something much,